Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're jumping into some pretty deep waters. We're looking at really big questions about being human, morality, and just how to live well.
Yeah, how to navigate life when it feels, well, pretty chaotic a lot of the time.
Exactly. And our source material for this is it's this fascinating book that pulls together ancient wisdom, modern psychology, even biology, kind of connects the dots.
Right. And our mission really is to pull out the key insights for you, give you a shortcut to understanding these like foundational principles shaping our lives, personal stuff, societal stuff, all of it.
So let's start with that big question. What does living well actually mean? You know, especially when everything feels so overwhelming. We're going to explore some maybe surprising ideas about rules, truth, responsibility, even suffering itself.
It should be quite the journey. And the source kicks off with this really striking idea using the analogy, God didn't give Moses the 10 suggestions, he gave commandments.
That is differently, doesn't it? Suggestions versus commandments?
Yeah.
Not asking politely?
No, it's framing them as essential principles. The argument is, without real rules, we risk becoming slaves to our passions. We end up aiming low.
Like that story of the golden calf. People just adrift, worshiping something, well, less than ideal because there's no firm structure.
Precisely. And the book links this to what it sees as a modern issue, this focus on moral relativism leading to, and this is a quote, serious intellectual and moral neglect.
Wow. So, a neglect of virtue.
Yeah, it contrasts that with someone like Aristotle, who believed humans actually have this built-in tendency, a proclivity to make rules. The idea that we can live without any moral concerns. The book calls that a fantasy. It's just not how we're wired.
Okay, so we need structure, we need rules, but then the source brings in this other idea, right? The Taoist concept.
That's right, yang and yin. Yang is order, structure, predictability, the known,
Right.
symbolically masculine.
Okay.
And yin is chaos, the unexpected, the source of novelty, the unknown, symbolically feminine.
And the sweet spot, the meaning, is somewhere between.
Exactly. Meaning is to be found on the border between the ever-entwined pair. That's where you're stable enough, but also exploring enough, changing enough, repairing. It's a dynamic balance, a dance.
Not just pure order, not just pure chaos. That makes sense. And if you don't have that balance, or at least a shared sense of what order even is.
Well, that's where things can get scary. The book stresses how vital a shared belief system, a shared hierarchy of value is. It's needed for cooperation, even for how we perceive things.
And without it.
Without it, the danger is nihilism, that feeling that nothing matters. The source argues that when that happens, the horror of existence rapidly becomes paramount. Meaning isn't just nice, it's like a necessary buffer against the inherent suffering of life.
That's heavy. Okay, speaking of hierarchies, segment 2 gets right into that, doesn't it? Dominance, biology.
Oh yeah, it starts with things like the classic pecking order in chickens. Schilder-Ebbe observed that way back.
Right.
Or think about wrens fiercely defending their little patch of land. Territory is crucial for survival, for mating. It's fundamental.
And then it goes to lobsters.
Lobsters, yeah. This is fascinating. If a lobster loses a fight, its brain chemistry changes dramatically. Sometimes, the book says, its brain can basically dissolve and regrow as a subordinate's brain.
Wait, hang on. It dissolves. Seriously.
That's the description used. It's a profound neurological shift reflecting its new status.
That's wild. And there's a human connection.
Absolutely. Low-ranking lobsters, the ones who lose, they produce less serotonin, which is, a key neurotransmitter linked to mood and status in humans too.
Okay.
And get this, antidepressants like Prozac, which work on serotonin, they can actually cheer up lobsters.
No way, really?
Yeah, it points to this incredible evolutionary continuity. These systems are ancient.
So this whole dominance hierarchy thing, it's not just like capitalism or culture.
Yeah.
The book argues it's way deeper.
Much deeper. It calls it a near-eternal aspect of the environment, older than trees, older than our hands. It's presented as a permanent, real feature of being, part of the fundamental nature of reality.
Huh. That's a challenging idea for a lot of people, I imagine. It pushes back against the idea that all hierarchy is just a social construct.
It definitely does. It suggests the tendency is biological, even if the specific forms hierarchies take are shaped by culture. And this connects to something called Price's Law.
Which is like the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule.
Exactly, yeah. A very small number of people produce very much of everything. Think top authors, musicians, scientists. A few people account for a huge chunk of the output.
And the flip side of that.
The flip side is stark. The book states pretty bluntly, the bottom is not a good place to be. It's linked to more unhappiness, more illness, even shorter lives. And this isn't just about money. It applies in many domains.
Okay, so that sounds potentially pretty bleak. If hierarchies are real and inequality is sort of built in, what do we do?
Well, here's the crucial shift in perspective the book offers. It says, look, there isn't just one game to win. There are many good games.
Ah, okay. So don't just focus on the one big ladder.
Right. Your specific situation, the combination of games you are playing, career, family, hobbies, personal growth, it's unique. So unique that comparing yourself directly to others, it's simply inappropriate.
That feels freeing, actually.
It is. And it leads to this idea that maybe growing might be the most important form of winning. Focus on your own trajectory, your own improvement, rather than just your rank compared to others.
That's a really hopeful note, and it flows nicely into the next segment, which is all about truth, the radical act of telling the truth. It starts with this concept of life lies. What are those?
Life lies are, well, they're attempts to bend reality to fit what you want. Using your thoughts, your actions, to force a specific narrow outcome, refusing to accept anything else.
Why do we do that?
The book suggests it comes from a kind of arrogance, believing your current knowledge is enough, that reality itself is too unbearable unless you control it completely.
And the alternative is just telling the truth.
Or, as the book puts it, maybe more pragmatically at first, tell the truth, or at least don't lie. And there's this really personal account in the source, an admission of realizing almost everything I said was untrue, just constant positioning, trying to win arguments, impress people.
That takes guts to admit.
It does. And the breakthrough was starting to practice only saying things that this internal voice would not object to.
Yeah.
Using inner honesty as a guide, especially when feeling lost, it became a skill.
And this has real-world effects.
Huge effects. There's an example given of a therapist dealing with a client's really disturbing fantasies. By responding honestly, transparently, not necessarily approvingly, but truthfully, it built trust. It helped the client differentiate, to untangle messed up perceptions, like confusing his wife with his mother. Truth allows for clarity.
Wow, okay. And what about negative feelings, like resentment?
Resentment gets special attention. It's called a revelatory emotion. It tells you something important.
Which is?
One of two things, usually. Either the person feeling it is being immature, maybe expecting too much, or there's tyranny afoot. Someone is genuinely being mistreated or oppressed.
And if it's tyranny?
Then there's a moral obligation to speak up. Because, and this is powerful, silence is a lie, and tyranny feeds on lies.
Silence is a lie. Whew, that really makes you think. So how do we put this into practice, this truth-telling, speaking up?
The book suggests starting small. Aim for incremental improvement, like set a goal. By the end of the day, I want things in my life to be a tiny bit better than they were this morning.
Just a tiny bit.
Just a tiny bit. Because it compounds, like interest. Consistent small improvements add up massively over time. And crucially, what you aim at determines what you see. Aiming for betterment helps you notice the opportunities to actually make things better.
Okay. Aiming shapes perception. And this connects to sacrifice.
Yes. Sacrifice is framed as basically work. It's the uniquely human thing of giving up something of value in the present time, comfort, resources for a better future.
Which goes against our basic instincts, right?
Totally. It runs absolutely contrary to our ancient, fundamental animal instincts for immediate gratification. But the book argues it's absolutely essential for building civilization, for creating meaning beyond the immediate moment.
Right. Okay. This leads us into the final segment. Courage, vulnerability, and finding meaning in suffering. And it starts with a kind of quirky rule. Do not bother children when they are skateboarding.
Yeah. It's a metaphor, obviously. A powerful one.
For letting kids take risks.
Exactly. For allowing exposure to manageable danger. Kids seek that challenge. They want to triumph over danger, to become competent. Things like skate stoppers, literal or metaphorical forms of overprotection get in the way of that vital process.
As a warning attached.
A stark one. If you think tough men are dangerous, wait until you see what weak men are capable of. Implying that preventing competence can lead to worse outcomes down the line.
Yikes. Okay. And this connects to the idea of the terrible mother archetype.
Figures like Tiamat in mythology or Maleficent, Ursula in stories, they represent that smothering overprotection that actually devours potential by tempting people back into dependency, into unconsciousness.
So the opposite of encouraging competence.
Exactly. It's the force that wants to keep you safe but dependent, preventing you from facing the terrible world and developing your own strength.
And facing the world inevitably means facing suffering.
Yes. The irreducible truth of being, as the book calls it. Suffering is unavoidable. And it shares that incredibly tough personal story about the author's daughter, Michaela, and her severe rheumatoid arthritis.
Which brings up that huge question.
The unavoidable one. What sort of God would make a world where such a thing could happen? It confronts that pain head on.
But then offers a different perspective.
A really profound one. The insight is, what can be truly loved about a person is inseparable from their limitations.
Say more about that.
Well, think of Superman. When he became almost infinitely powerful, he got boring. The argument is that meaningful existence, being of any reasonable sort, actually requires limitation. Our boundaries, our struggles, are part of what makes us who we are, part of what allows for love and meaning.
That's actually quite beautiful. Reframing limitation not just as a negative.
Right. And then it moves beyond just sort of natural suffering to the problem of evil, specifically man's inhumanity to man.
Like Dostoevsky's Underground Man or those chimpanzee warfare observations.
Exactly. It highlights the capacity for cruelty. And it argues that this often stems from a failure to make the right sacrifices. From willful blindness, choosing not to see the truth about ourselves or the world. This can lead down a path of bitterness, revenge, ultimately hell itself.
So evil isn't just out there, it's something we can choose or choose to fight against within ourselves.
That's the core message, which leads to the final call to action. It's quite direct.
What is it?
Aim high. Set your sights on the betterment of being. Align yourself in your soul with truth and the highest good.
That's a powerful charge.
It is. It says, essentially, there's work to do. There is habitable order to establish and beauty to bring into existence. There is evil to overcome, suffering to ameliorate, and yourself to better. It's a vision of purpose, of agency, even in the face of all the difficulty.
And then that last little rule, pet a cat when you encounter one on the street. It feels almost gentle after all that intensity.
It does, doesn't it? It's presented as a symbol. Dogs, the book notes, are sort of like us, social, hierarchical, domesticated. Cats are different.
How so?
They're their own creatures, more independent, semi-domesticated. They represent a bit of nature itself. And when a cat approaches you, accepts a moment of contact, it's like a little moment of grace. Nature approves.
Oh, so it's about finding those small moments of connection, of light, amidst the bigger struggles.
Exactly. A tiny respite from the weight of suffering. A reminder that beauty and connection can be found unexpectedly. It ties everything together in a really poignant way.
Wow, what a deep dive that was. From needing rules and order to the biology of hierarchy, the radical act of telling the truth, facing suffering, finding courage.
Yeah, it covers so much ground. And the point isn't just abstract philosophy. The book really frames these as practical tools, ways to think about and navigate your own life.
Absolutely. They feel very applicable.
And maybe here's a final thought, something the source makes you ponder. A life lived thoroughly justifies its own limitations.
A life lived thoroughly justifies its limitations.
Yeah. So the question for you listening might be, how can you start to live more thoroughly? How can you embrace your own limitations, not as failures, but as part of that meaningful existence? And maybe in doing that, find a meaning that even overcomes the fear of death. Something to think about.